A while back, I was able to quote hit top 50 in Pokemon Auto Chess, although this was due to a little bit of luck as I landed a few positions under top 50 and then some of the players around me lost elo to drop out. Well, that has still been an attainable goal of mine for a bit now, and with recent improvements in my gameplay, I found myself one solid game away from top 50. Of course, this wasn't going to come easy. While every 1250 plus lobby is filled with the best Pokemon Auto Chess players in the world, there are some notable threats here. Sir Smithy, a perennial top 100 player and one of the most knowledgeable in the game, and how about perennial top 10 player Torterrible? I've also had plenty of battles with Jafer in 1150 plus and 1250 plus lobbies, so how am I going to pull this one off? Start with a Swinub and a Geodude in my opening shop. So I decide to send it into a ground portal to see about getting a solid ground opener. I pull a second Swinub that comes with a charcoal. Then, on stage 2, I lock a Piloswine in my shop. The reason for this is so that I can get a couple extra ground holes dug out before the evolution. The same goes for stage 3. Going into the first item carousel, I almost have a perfect set of items for an early Piloswine carry. I run straight for the Never Melt Ice and immediately slam a Muscle Band and Shell Bell onto Piloswine. In my excitement, I bought the Evo a little too early and lost out on one extra stage of a hole I was digging. Oh well. I take the early level to 4 to have an extra unit on the board, and off we go. This one is easy. 3 unevolved ground units aren't going to be able to touch Piloswine. A couple stacks on the Muscle Band gives a nice boost on attack and defense, while the ability cast secures the win. Adding an Amorphous unit is always scary in high elo lobbies, but I'm thinking about committing to ground. I'm not a huge fan of any of these items, but this does open up a choice specs on Piloswine. I decide to only slam a single spoon though, as ideally I can eventually get a Soul Dew for that extra PP generation. I'm trusting in the early Piloswine to carry, and I'm going to greed a bit for my items. Guess what? This backfires immediately. I matched into an early Fire Ghost team with a Max Revive and 2 evolved units. With 3 units focusing down the Charmeleon, it gets taken down before it is able to get what would have been a devastating cast off. My units move along, and Piloswine starts working down Flareon. With no Max Revive, this would have been easy, but its second life kicks in, keeping Piloswine off of Litwick. It goes down and I lose, and I wonder if that extra 100 AP from the choice specs would have swung this one. Mudkip in the shop allows me to activate ground 4, which will be a nice boost for Piloswine. This is a great team for Pilo to go up against, as it has a lot of weak auto attacks that will get its Muscle Band stacked quickly. Satotl gets ganged up on, and the Rocky Helmet does a great job of stalling until Pilo casts to knock it out. The ice freezes are a bit annoying, but auto attacks against a full Muscle Band just aren't going to do enough, and Pilo walks them down to win this battle. I get the dreaded Ice Cream Cone in my shop and decide to flip out Knackley for it. This gives me a fantastic ranged ability and buffs up Pilo by allowing it to freeze on hit. I match into another evolution, but this one works out in my favor this time, for it has no ranged units to scale up behind that Rocky Helmet, and Piloswine is able to quickly get its Muscle Band stacked. Vanillite proves to be a great addition, as the freezes and ability casts make this battle super easy. My waiting ends up paying off, as I get my Mystic Water and therefore my Soul Dew. I'll have uses for another spoon later, so I'm okay with having an extra one. This is a scary matchup. Ghost for this early with a big Pilo to hold off my units. The front lines engage, and the Ghost Curse silences Pilo to delay its cast. Jafer's Piloswine casts to put mine at low health, and Honedge throws Vanillite into the fray. My Piloswine is hung on thanks to its Muscle Band, but casts to take out Jafer's, starting the spell tag timer. It's able to turn and take out Metang, and Honedge quickly follows. Then the curse hits, and Pilo falls. Mudkip walks up and just barely finishes this one off. An earlier cast from Vanillite got the Litwick low enough for Mudkip. I walk into Gyarados having only lost one matchup, which bodes well for my ground mid game. I do some scouting and get some very important information. 2 ice players and a ghost player, which means I can potentially turn this Twisted Spoon into an ability shield. Gyarados goes down and presents me with another spoon. I'm actually gathering up a solid set of AP items, so when my unique pick presents me with Cryogonal, I stop and think for a minute. In the end, I decide to stick with ground. As tempting as Cryogonal is, I would be double contested on ice while trying to pivot into it. That seems like a recipe for disaster. Pilo is holding good enough items for Orthworm, so I sell it and switch those out. Then, I temp a level to 6 and roll a few times to get another ground unit. This helps me not only dig out my board faster, but gives my carry better stats from those holes. I match into a near itemless Electric 5 team, although Plusle and Minun are extremely scary regardless. All these weak units just means that Orthworm can get stacked up with essentially 0 risk, and while a couple casts from Plusle and Minun do a little bit of damage, Orthworm is able to heal it all off. Magnemite goes down, and a big chomp on Minun finishes this battle. Remember how I said earlier that I scouted and saw some Ghost and Ice in this lobby? Well, the ad pick presents me with a beautiful Miracle Seed, which I promptly used to craft an ability shield to help protect my Orthworm from some of those nasty effects. The Rune Protect is nice, but between digging out my board and having a very weak team outside of my unique, my units fall quickly. A handful of strong attacks from Mimikyu and Meryl blasting my units, and very quickly I'm left with just Orthworm. It turns into a 6v1, and while Orthworm has a bit of survivability, it ultimately isn't enough. I know there are a lot of AP based teams popping up in this lobby, and since I already have a Twisted Spoon, I gun straight for the Never Melt Ice. This gives me a Power Lens to reflect back special damage, which goes very well with my beefed up ground defenses. My econ is solid, even coming off a loss, and I'm still very healthy, so I decide to push to level 7 to get more digging done. As it stands, I'll probably have to accept a few losses in the mid game unless Orthworm goes Super Saiyan. Orthworm, in fact, has the worst pathfinding I've ever seen, which definitely isn't helped by my positioning to dig holes. It's out of the fight for an entire 7 seconds, allowing my opponent to get a big damage lead over me, and an uncontested unknown pops for free. It's looking dire for me in a 3v7, which quickly turns into another 6v1 with just Orthworm standing. And, well, Orthworm did in fact go Super Saiyan. Nimble goes down, and then a huge cast onto Burmy to take it out. And then finally, after soaking up tons of damage, Orthworm takes down Sigilith to miraculously win this battle for me. It would take a ton for Orthworm to repeat its last performance, especially with the added burn from Fire and Ghost Curse. A max revive Charmeleon is going to be tough to break through. Lampent throws out plenty of damage safely from the backline, while Charmeleon keeps Orthworm occupied. Orthworm is left in another impossible looking fight. Charmeleon's second life kicks in, and this time the damage is too overwhelming for Orthworm and it goes down. I'm finally able to find another ground unit in my shop and send that Turtwig to the dojo. I know I'm already behind most of my opponents who used their dojo tickets earlier, and unfortunately I'm unable to wait for a more optimal unit to spend it on. The Mew duo fight gets a little scary because my unit quality is still very weak. Orthworm keeps it in check for me though, and prevents what would be a very bad loss. Item wise, I'm not super thrilled with what I get, especially since I'm likely not going to be able to prep a red orb for a potential Groudon. Instead, I grab a Magnet as I feel like it is the least breakable item here. My ability shield eventually will be very useful against this team, but for now it's not doing a lot of work on the unevolved Mudkip and Shellos. Orthworm is positioned for digging, so its muscle band can't get stacked. The common story in these last few rounds has been weak unit quality, and that continues with all of these fodder units falling quickly. Orthworm finds itself in another 1v6. I honestly think if it wasn't for the freezing, it might have been able to pull this one off. It puts up a very respectable fight, but the timer ticks down to enrage every unit, which ultimately ends Earthworm's stand. Another ice team with 2 rocky helmets is once again going to prove hard to break through. We'll speed through this one as it's the same story as the last fight, except Cryogonal makes sure it ends much faster. And suddenly, my HP that was a strong resource heading into the mid game is getting scarce. I'm presented with 2 fantastic tools at the carousel, a Dragon Scale and an Experience Share. Ultimately, I go for the Experience Share as this allows the Frigibacks on my bench to essentially act as a ground unit by sharing their buffs. If I can find a Gibble, I'll have Dragon 3 between it, Frigibacks, and Vibrava. Piloswine helped carry my early game, but Piloswine is going to take away from me in the mid game. Alongside a Protector Duo Blade, my units are having a hard time breaking through. A blue Namacon Rotom is firing away safely from the backline, and with just ground 6 activated, I don't stand a chance here. I'm down to 30 HP, but it's time to make my final stand with ground 8. I level up and start rolling. Ground 8 is the big priority here, but if I'm able to throw in Dragon 3, I'll look to do that too. Burmy is a huge pickup, activating Bug 2 for me. Swinub goes in for now to take the Experience Share, as it can still benefit from Orthworm's stats. I find a Shellos and accidentally roll over a Gligar, but I find a second Ditto just as the fight starts, which gives me a Rhydon, assuming I can find Rhyhorn. Orthworm came up big in this matchup last time, and a win here would leave me with an extra life in the late game. Level advantage goes to me, with the Bug 2 synergy giving me an extra Vibrava. Minon's max revive gets triggered pretty quickly as Orthworm starts soaking up hits in the middle to get some stacks. Plusle and Minon take away my numbers advantage to make this fight a 3v3, but Orthworm is fully stacked up now. It chomps Minon, triggers Plusle's max revive, and finishes off Magneton before circling back to Plusle. I make it to Ho-Oh and Lugia with 30 HP, which means I can afford 1, maybe 2 very close losses going into the end game. I got my big buff with ground 8, and now it's time to get a few stronger units to make my final push to the top. The Tower Duo gives me a Heart Scale and a Miracle Seed, which will eventually turn into a Sticky Barb. And in my next shop, Rhyhorn and Gibble both show up at the perfect time. I use my Dittos to get Rhydon, and then hop into a ground portal uncontested. I'm met with Zygarde, who gives me huge flexibility with adding more dragons to my composition alongside the Gibble in my shop. I add both of them to my team alongside Rhydon, which gives me ground 10. Obviously, I don't need ground 10, so Burmy gets replaced with Frigibax. A quick reposition and a sticky barb slam later, we're on to the next fight. The ground 8 buff, especially now with 2 fully dug rows, gives my units massive buffs. Rhydon's presence is immediately felt. It takes out Sligo early on and gets off an execute on Avalugg. Next to it, Orthworm takes down Carbink, while Frigibax dashes into the backline to take some pressure off of Zygarde. As the weak units get picked off, Kyurem gets collapsed on and finished off by Orthworm. A very balanced damage chart saw contributions from plenty of members on the team. This should have happened last round, but I had a lot to manage, so it slipped my mind. This round though, I replaced Palossand with Bagon, activating Dragon 5 and Monster 4. My dragons get a bit of extra longevity, and Rhydon gets to keep being a menace with those monster stacks. It honestly might be the best unit in the game. Turtwig gets evolved, and while I would love a Gastrodon, the Dragon 5 bump is much more important. In pops a level 7 Psychic team with a Spell Crit Duosian, but because there have been AP teams, I have that Power Lens primed and ready on Grottle. Finally, the nuke goes off, but it kills itself. Grottle's Power Lens reflected so much damage that Duosian took itself out. Man, did that Power Lens show its worth this round. And what's better than 1 Power Lens? How about 2? The item carousel blesses me, and yes, while I would like to itemize Zygarde at some point, I can really tip the matches against these AP teams heavily in my favor. At 30 HP, I'm not really concerned about level 9 right now, and with so many unevolved units, I keep rolling down. My efforts are rewarded with 2 Dittos, a Gibble, a Trapinch, and another Turtwig. The Dittos give me an Arctibax, and Rhydon gets the new Power Lens. I also decide to just throw a Thunderstone on Zygarde for the extra attack speed. I dug up a Fossil Stone a few rounds ago, so might as well make use of the pretty solid amount of attack speed the Thunderstone gives. I match up into the second place player running Fire, Human, and Fighting 6 with some big beefy gym rats up front. Reshiram doesn't have our Reaper Claw, so its cast just tickles my Orthworm for now. Hitmonlee is pretty stacked up and is working its way through my team to get to Zygarde. Arctibax comes up huge by dashing into Reshiram, and with those extra ground stats, barely hangs on to take it out of a fight. Rhydon and Orthworm trigger Girder's Max Revive, and a big Orthworm chomp breaks through Hitmonlee's human healing. Just Girder is left, who can't do much against 2 of my strongest ground units. Just before the round, I'm able to get Gabite from the shop, giving my team another buff. I see 2 AP items with the Soul Dew and Choice Specs, so I should definitely get some good mileage out of the Power Lenses. The ability shield helps for a few seconds, but with Ice 8, freezing is just inevitable. But the freeze actually helps me here. Rhydon gets behind to target Vanillish, but gets frozen by Glalie. The freeze causes it to change targets to Regice and immediately executes it on the spot. Avalugg and Vanillish go down, so Rhydon slowly walks over to Glalie and immediately executes it too. With Rhydon taking down the big damage carries, Zygarde and Orthworm were able to clean it up elsewhere. The legendary birds are no match for my ground team, and I end up grabbing a Deep Sea Tooth for Zygarde. This will pair nicely with the attack speed boost it has to let it get some extra casts off. Jafer's team is looking extremely scary since I last fought it. The Protector Duoblade has evolved into Aegislash, not to mention the ever-threatening Ghost 8 curse. I quickly get a big numbers advantage, but remember that Ghost can turn the tides around quickly. Jafer is down to their last 3 units as my Orthworm falls to the Ghost curse. Rhydon executes Rotom to put me in a 7 versus 2. But his Aegislash just won't go down, and Mew is firing attacks off from the corner. Zygarde falls next to the curse as it moves to Rhydon. My units are finally able to break through Aegislash, but the damage may be done. Rhydon succumbs to the curse, 2v1. The Mew's taken enough damage that Arctibax and Grottle are just barely able to run it down, and I very narrowly survive. 2 others went out of the game that round, so I'm left in the top 3 against the 2 players I just beat in the last 2 PvP rounds. So I'm feeling very good about a top 1 now, and I have a new plan. With another Rhyhorn in my shop, I want to try to hit level 9 to play it on the field too. Match into the Ghost of the Ice team, and this fight goes pretty similar to last time. The stars of my ground team are just too bulky for this team to break through. Glalie's Punching Glove does some work, but there isn't a lot of support in front of it. I'm inching closer and closer to the win. In my lust, I decide to go for a 3rd Power Lens. This wasn't the strongest item carousel for what my team needed, but I think at this point 3 Power Lenses is a bit overkill, and another item could have been more useful. Nonetheless, it goes on to Gabite because I had to be very super sure that those spellcasts weren't going to be the death of me. Back to the Ghost team, and this Aegislash is just going to keep causing problems. The surrounding units fall with ease, but Rotom is racking up damage this time around. The Power Lenses are slowly whittling it down, but the Ghost Curse is going to make sure my team can't win from Power Lens chip damage. Orthworm falls to the curse. Arctibax and Rotom take each other out in the corner to make this a brief 2v2 before the curse knocks out Zygarde. Rhydon finds itself as the last one standing, and with Aegislash and Mew at full health, it's just not going to be able to do the damage it needs to do before the curse also takes it out. PvE round guarantees that I'll be able to hit level 9 and play my second Rhyhorn, as I'll have just enough gold to do so. I get another set of subpar items from the legendary beasts, and take the punching glove for Zygarde to maybe help break through this Aegislash. Alright, back to the ice team, and while I got that punching glove to help with Aegislash, it actually puts in some big damage against this team too. Zygarde is able to rip through Avalugg and then moves to focus on Lapras. The glove does a great job of breaking through that rocky helmet pretty quickly. Zygarde starts walking him down with a wall of strong ground units in front of it. My second Rhyhorn didn't even really need to do anything, as the big addition of the punching glove took down that front line with ease. Stage 30, the last fight between Jafer and I. Big problem though, adding the third item onto Zygarde means it's the first one targeted by the Ghost Curse, which is a huge oversight by me, and it goes down way too early. The good news is that Grotle and Rhydon get right onto Rotom, so it can't wreak havoc like it did in the last matchup. Aegislash casts and puts Rhydon directly in front of Mew, but Rhydon isn't able to get the full execute this time, which would have been game winning for me. If my team can just get through Aegislash, they can run down the Mew, but the sticky barb goes crazy. Grotle gets an auto attack off to take it out, and it's just the low health Mew left. Arctibax catches Mew, but can only get one hit off. Grotle catches up and it's a tie. I didn't realize it in the moment because both units were such low health. I just thought they took each other out, but Mew is holding a spell tag, which curses the unit to knock it out. But when a knockout curse is applied to a unit that already has the knockout curse, it just triggers instantly, which is what happened here, giving me a second place finish. A win would have very likely put me at my peak elo, which remains at 1326. But hey, I can't argue with my peak leaderboard placement at number 42, officially making me a top 50 player in Pokemon Auto Chess. Even if it was shortly lived, I will still take the bragging rights.